Welcome to Taiwan Talks, covering the latest global news from Taiwan perspective. I am Annie Kuhl. According to data from Nikkei News, the world's top 10 semiconductor or manufacturers, including giants like TSMC, Samsung, and Intel, will see a reduction in annual capital expenditure in 2023, the first in 4 years. Now, this decrease, marking the most significant decrease in a decade, is projected average negative 16% year on year, with an estimated decline to $122 billion from the previous year. Now, what messages do these numbers show? With me today to discuss the topic are Marco Mezger, Neumonda Executive Vice President and Chief Operating Officer, Gary Ting, KYMCO Capital General Manager and Managing Partner. Warm welcome to the show. Now, as we also mentioned earlier, Marco, I would like to first ask you, we're seeing a very significant decrease of capital expenditure. So what does this mean for the semiconductor industry in general?
Well, if you look at CapEx, I think you mentioned it's going down like 16%. So I'm specialized in the memory market, which is the biggest or one of the biggest share of the semiconductor industry. And the reduction in CapEx is even more severe. So we are talking the lowest CapEx in 7 years in DRAM technology and the lowest CapEx in NAND technology since 8 years. The challenge when you have the low CapEx is like when the market, of course, is getting weak, the companies have to react.
Right.
But when the market is turning, they cannot quickly increase the output because you have a longer time to bring this CapEx in. I think at the moment everybody is very cautious because the factors of mobile phone market is weak, PC notebook market is weak. Demand overall is like more weak in these high running commodities.
Right.
And then in comparison, you have AI and other industries who are driving, but they are too small. So I think the manufacturers are cautious to invest money right now, at least this year, probably also going into next year.
So how do you think this can be solved? As you just mentioned earlier, there is a decrease in capital expenditure. Now, if there is going to be a rebound, but then if they can catch up, do you think this is also going to lead to supply chain disruptions?
Well, we have seen the disruptions during COVID, right? So I think this is, everybody has these memories and hope this is not happening again.
Right.
But because of this massive investment, what companies have to do in regards to the expansion of the equipment, like the semiconductor equipment has also lead time when you buy this, right? And the money you spend on this. So the effect will definitely be there that when market is picking up, there will be not so fast the capacity there.
Right.
And so this will have in certain segments definitely challenges in order to comply with the demand.
And as we're seeing now, this is also perceived by many experts that there is concern over China's, like economic slowdown. So Professor Dean, I would like to ask, how substantial or how important do you think is China's economy to the semiconductor industry?
Yeah, it's even today, I know everybody knows the China is still the largest semiconductor market in the whole world. To my understanding, I think it's over 53% around the whole global chip sales. And also, China is the key hub for the iPhone, smartphone, and tech device. So I believe it's still very important for the semiconductor. And today, if we look at China is very mysterious. Not everybody understands what happened in China.
Right.
But I know after the COVID-19, still, especially after the lockdown last year, consumer lose confidence. Because when they feel uncertainty in the future, they were trying to put the money in the bank. Instead of buying some everything, luxury. So right now, I know the consumer confidence is losing somewhere. And the geopolitical is another stress. So that means export and the import, all the numbers is very ugly. So right now, everything stress on the China. So the semiconductor, that's the reason why the whole semiconductor players trying to cut the expenditure. That's the reason.
And do you think this is going to have a major impact to the U.S.?
I think the U.S. is also the same, because right now even we know in G20, the officers from the Europe and the United States always insist no decoupling. Right now it's de-risking.
De-risking, yes.
But everybody knows in semiconductor, they want the subsidy ask you to do something unsure, that will be the problem for the cost and the efficiency.
Right.
So even in United States, this is a big problem for everyone, including the India.
Right, right. And Marco, I see you're nodding your head. Do you agree?
Yes, 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 absolutely, yeah. Yeah.
And also, Marco, you also mentioned earlier that, you know, given China's massive market for PC sales, how do you think China's economic slowdown may also affect semiconductor industry, including the market for memory and manufacturing? Do you think they will face a stagnation?
Well, I think you mean just for the China market?
Right.
Yeah, I think for the China market, I think that's what Gary just mentioned. The challenge is right now that the stimulation, what everybody was hoping, right? Everybody was hoping after COVID-19 there's a hockey stick, and all the researchers, the analysts were basically saying, oh, it's coming back very quickly, but it's not coming back very quickly. So in fact, basically there are more challenges there. And I think if the consumers are not spending, there's no mobile phone, no PCs, or just everything is kind of reduced, right? But the long-term trend for semiconductor and basically the usage of semiconductor in a variety of applications is basically there. So in this regards, we are right now in a very strange situation where we have like special technology, let's say like artificial intelligence, which is making their way in and the headlines every single day. But if you look, for example, on the semiconductor the last 12 months, you have seen a significant drop comparing to last year, right? We probably will end up with double digit this year. So the only good thing at the moment is the last 4 consecutive months, we have seen month-over-month increase. Very, very small. But this gives already the industry some hope that basically the things are turning around, right, for a better. Because on this level where we are right now, to give you a number, the memory companies alone, like Samsung, SK Hynix, Micron, they will lose this year $25 billion in one single year. No company in the world, not even Samsung, can sustain this for a longer period. So the market has to change, less capex, less wafer starts per month, so less output in order to adjust to the demand from the market. And when the market picks up, then basically the pricing will go up because not so many parts are available, and pricing will be again profitable for the manufacturers. So
the downfall that we're seeing right now, it is for sure just temporary. It's not going to be sustainable, and then we're trying to see the market coming back up very soon. So from your expertise in semiconductor, how do you think the market will come back up? What do you think the process is going to be like?
Yeah, that's a $1 million question, right? So will it be like a extremely quick recovery, like the hockey stick, right? Or will it be going slow? So I would say I normally have seen in memory space already some change probably in this quarter, right? So we see already pricing is not going down anymore that much. Prices are more solid, but they're also not going crazy up. So when you hear a lot of the news about artificial intelligence, you hear about memory that is used in this type of application, like in OpenAI, ChatGPT. There's a lot of activity going on, and I think last but not least, you see NVIDIA, how they are performing in the data center space, where they are consuming these components. So it could be that when manufacturers are deciding they are shifting their production capacity for certain technologies, that maybe some longevity legacy technologies are falling behind. And these are mainly the customers who are also not buying such a high volume, like industrial customers. And they suffer then, basically. We have seen this even right now. There are companies who are not getting their MCUs, like microcontrollers or FPGAs, with a reasonable lead time, and they're still waiting to get the parts. So it's not everywhere in semiconductor industry that we have like overcapacity. So there are still certain pockets where the industry is still recovering from the long COVID period.
And Professor Ting, what is your take on this?
Yeah, I think maybe 3 months ago, there are some kind of a Micron case happened, right? We can find Japan and the Korea players get nervous about that. And even 2 weeks ago, we know the Korea and the Japan's leader go to the United States in the David camp to meet up with the Biden. So we know on the point of my view, I think right now the memory just the beginning. If you look at the 14th 5-year plan from China, you can find out they emphasize on the dual circulation. what is a deceleration? That means in the mature chip, they will try their best to use the subsidy to trying to make up the tools facility, to trying to develop China's own semiconductor industry. In the advanced chip, we can find the Samsung in there. They will try their best, maybe based on the country's support to find out. So I believe not just Korea and Japan, even Taiwan, all the semiconductor, they're nervous about what happened in the future.
Okay, so with the global economy hinging on China's vast market and manufacturing capacities, the IMF anticipates that China will be the most substantial contributor to global growth in the forthcoming 5 years, constituting 22.6% of all the overall economic expansion. But now we're seeing that China's economy is currently grappling with an array of negative economic indicators encompassing consumption, as we mentioned earlier, investments, and exports. As we can see here, retail sales experienced a modest 2.5% year-on-year growth in July, falling short of the projected 4.5%. Industrial production's year-on-year growth was at 3.7%, which was below the expected 4.4%. The initial 7 months of this year saw fixed asset investment growth lower than expected as well. Now, the downturn in real estate investment continues its trajectory. So back to you, Professor Ting, as we're seeing that we were seeing so many numbers, and we're not seeing that all these numbers were not actually reaching their expectations. And particularly, China's export contracted by 14.5% year-on-year in July. Now, what does this number mean? This number means that it is marking the lowest point since March 2020. Based on this, what does this signify?
Yeah, it's very strange. If you just look at the CPI decline, maybe we can say, oh, consumer, because face of this uncertainty, so they don't want to spend too much. But the PPI is also decline. That means manufacturer face some challenge. Actually, I believe most of the Taiwanese know Taiwanese business, when they go to the China, first destination is Dongguan. So most of the Taiwanese go to Dongguan. And in the past 5 years, they go to the Xiamen. But I know Chinese government just announcement, the GDP of the first half, the worst 2 cities is Dongguan and Xiamen.
That the worst means, 2 cities?
Yes, because these 2 provinces is the biggest export destination and hub for the global world. So that means, yes, right now, the manufacturer, including the import and the export, all face the biggest challenge right now. If we want to look at what China would do to deal with this problem, we can look at Huawei. Huawei is a very key player. I believe Huawei is trying to do something to solve the problem for China, including the export and the import.
And how do you think this can be done?
We can look at the 5G mobile chip.
Right.
I believe Huawei is trying to develop their own semiconductor, especially about the mobile chip. If Huawei can trying to overcome the challenge right now, maybe China has the opportunity to develop their own semiconductor industry.
And Marco, do you have any take on this, for this downturn and downfall, like what Professor Ting just mentioned earlier, not only consumption-wise, but also manufacturing-wise? So what does this signify?
Right, like 2 points. I think the first point, what I would like to add, what Gary mentioned, is that not only that less people probably were going to these 2 cities, it's also that actively out of China, going to Southeast Asia has been a lot of push. I mean, Foxconn moving to India, Vietnam, Thailand. There's a lot of companies in order to have a more balanced supply chain, where companies taking manufacturing capabilities, moving to other regions, right? I think it's preferred in Asia, I would say Vietnam, Thailand, Malaysia, but also India. I think Foxconn, which is one of the largest producer for Apple, basically built up factories there. So that's another factor on top, which when you combine this, you see this massive reduction. And I think for the Huawei, what Gary mentioned, they are pretty close based on reports, what we see, so that they are able to manufacture this chip at SMIC. This would be really like a big change if they can do this, because they are banned to also buy Qualcomm chips for 5G. That's why a few years ago they had to separate Huawei brand and Honor. But when they are able to make their own chip in China with all their patents, because Huawei has a lot of patents, then they would be able to be self-sufficient and can produce it. The challenge is, one more thing, the process node where they are producing is not as slow as the competitors, right? So I think they can normally above 10 nanometers what they could do. They say they can do up to 7 nanometers, but the challenge is, what is the yield? You need to produce in volume.
Right.
And so maybe technically you can make a 7 nanometer, but how about if you want to make millions and millions of these chips and you don't have the equipment? So that's something what also is not completely clear, right, Gary? I mean, this is what I also would see.
Yes.
Yeah, but I always think, just like I mentioned, China is not easy to understand, especially Beijing. Even I spent, I think, almost 20 years in China. If you stay in China more or longer, you will realize you don't understand what the Chinese is thinking, especially officers. After COVID-19, it's totally different. So I believe if you want to understand what the China government is doing in the industry, you can think about this kind of a situation. Think about that. In Taiwan, everybody like the Chinese chess, 象棋. In United States, everybody love to do the contract bridge. But if you go to Beijing, they love to do the Go chess. The Go chess mindset or philosophy totally different from the Western world. So I believe right now, Beijing government is trying to make some policy, but based on what Western world will be doing. So I know right now the Western media always look China very bad, say the bad economy and something wrong about China.
Right.
But I always believe if you understand what the Chinese personality, they know how to overcome the very bad situation to find the opportunity.
Right.
Yeah.
But you know, aside from being optimistic about this, there are also experts. They're kind of a little bit more pessimistic, as you know, there are predictions that China might also follow the path of Japan during back in the 1990s, that will probably enter a decade of stagnation. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, let's look at the 1980s. 1980s Japan, just like I mentioned, 30 years ago, globalization just emerging, and the United States has a very good power in the whole world. So they can say, hi, Japan, you need to follow my rule to do your industry arrangement, right? But right now, geopolitical is totally different.
Totally different, yes.
And China even has a big power in the economy. So right now, I believe, that's why I say, I believe Chinese government is trying to do some Go chess. That means I will depend what you are doing, then I will decide what I will do. So last week, we know the BRICS summit in South Africa, right? The Western media always think not so many countries will get in, but the truth is 6 not so small countries join.
Right.
So that means there will be 2 groups. And I believe we see the Janet Yellen and the Neumonda and even the many United States officers change their tune. They say no decoupling. Right now, it's the risking. And I believe in the next maybe 6 months, there will be something change between United States and China.
What do you think may change? What is the trigger there?
First of all, what it means in the risking and the decoupling. Decoupling means I don't know you.
Right.
I want trying to do everything to restrict you. That's decoupling. The risking means something I can trying to deal with you, but something I will not allow with you. Semiconductor, I believe, they will still trying to fight each other. But in EV, right now if you go to the Europe market, actually the biggest EV seller from China, and battery and energy, all is come from China. So I believe right now in the industry segment, actually China has some power to deal with China. So in the next 5-6 years, I believe the relationship between China and the United States will be a little released. But what will happen? We need to depend on the Chinese Go chess.
Right, exactly. What will happen still end up being China's mysteriousness and how they're going to define it. Marco, do you agree with that?
Yes, and to this point, I think also the US, when they started with the sanctions, they also did gradually adjust the sanctions when they saw something was not covered, right? So I think it's for them, I think they don't play the Chinese version of chess, but they also have these readjustments, right, what they are doing, because it's a new situation. We didn't have this before. And I think from a pure business perspective, I think it was never so good to have concentrated all the manufacturing capabilities in one region. So we need to have a more balanced supply chain. So we need to have in Europe, we need to have in USA, we need to have in India. So there needs to be a more mix, because then there's also more leverage when you want to do something. And I think in this sense, I think it's going into a direction which is probably helpful for more countries and not just for one.
And are you also very optimistic about how the relationship between China and the US, and also the relationship between China and Europe, will probably be more reliable to each other, and while also the tension will also release in the coming future?
I think definitely, I think the tone has changed already. So the tone has changed, and I think they are trying, all the government officials who have gone so far to China have not reached anything, but I think this week is Neumonda, I think the lady,
Neumonda.
yeah, she's coming.
Gina Neumonda.
Yeah, Gina, yeah. And there are some hopes that she probably will be a person who can have an impact where we see first.
And I want to go back to this topic a little bit, because starting from August, China has also implemented a control on exports such as gallium and germanium, and to retaliate against the US trade embargoes. So Professor Dean, I would like to ask you, in your personal point of view, which side is likely to endure the consequence? Do you think it's Taiwan, US, or China?
Yeah, actually, everybody want to know who is the winner. Actually, I think it's not an easy question, right? Because United States, in Chinese slogan, they will always say, when you hit somebody, you will also get hurt by yourself. So also, after the IRA last year, is almost 1 year, I believe every industry players realize actually it's not an easy one. That's why Gina Neumonda and Jenny Yellen will go to the Beijing trying to negotiate and find some other way to exit. And even today, I don't believe the subsidy is the best way to trying to promote the industry. Yes, right now globalization is gone, but I believe it's kind of rebalance. So that's why I mean in the next 6 months, we will realize there are some rebalancing will happen. That means United States and China will find some way to get out of right now the situation. But for Taiwan, actually, I believe the reason Korea and Japan's leader go to United States, they also worry about the future of the industry, especially semiconductor. For Taiwan, right now is a big election. So I believe actually this right now is a very critical time. Actually, Taiwan government should give us the roadmap, what we will do. The actually geopolitical is very lousy, you know. So right now, somebody need to find out that, not just want to be the president.
And Marco, do you want anything add to that?
No, I mean, for the industry overall, it's better, you know, people sit on the table and find a way how to do this, right? Because every side has opportunities to press the other side. And I think even Maurice Cheng from TSMC said one time, decoupling in the semiconductor industry is not possible.
It just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense. You have 700 steps in there where you need different companies, and we need to find a way that, of course, the technology is not used for military, but for consumer purposes, that you can use it, and this probably would help also the industry. Coming to your opening point, that we see a trajectory going up again and not going down.
Yeah, so what Marco and Professor Dean just mentioned earlier, as we're seeing a few years back, we're seeing decoupling, but now we're seeing de-risking. So we're actually seeing that the tension between the US and China will lessen in the very near future. But we're seeing that there is an economic downturn right now, but hopefully, because semiconductor, there is still a lot of industries that we still need to rely on each other, so the market will still come back up. But Biden just actually regarded the China's economic downturn as a time bomb. So, Professor Dean, why did you think that Biden actually used the word time bomb to describe China's current situation right now?
Yeah, first of all, I believe most of the Taiwanese understand, because next year is the biggest election for the United States. So I believe this is, has some kind of election language. the same as Taiwan. Especially next year, nobody know who will be the president. Maybe Trump, right? If Trump take on, everything will be different. But we need to admit, Chinese number is not so good so far. So that's why I always reminding, we need to watch what the Chinese government will do.
And lastly, I want to take this back to Marco. So based on what we discussed today, we still want to be as optimistic as we would like to be. So how do you personally perceive the potential impact for the Asian market later half this year, for the latter half this year?
For the later half, I mean, for semiconductor, so I definitely would see that in Q4, the supply chain and prices will get more stable, and I see, especially in memory segment, I see prices will go up.
And especially for next year, when we're seeing 2024, it will possibly climb up and rebound.
Yes, yes, yes. I mean, we are heading to a $1 trillion industry by 2030. So, and I think there's, as I mentioned before with AI, there's many segments where this technology is needed, where semiconductor has to go in. And so that's why I'm very positive about it.
Okay, so that will be all for this episode. Today we explore how the global semiconductor and supply chain will see a likely slowdown despite a projected rapid growth in the long term. China's economic slowdown, however, may yet to be a source of uncertainty. But at the same time, we're also being very optimistic, and we hope that later half this year and also in the future, and especially next year, we will see a return growth. If you like our discussion for today, please press like for this video and do not forget to subscribe to our channel. Thank you.